Devils and Demons, the prequel, Chapter 1, Demons in the Mist, written and recorded by King Guru. The box of Greasy Church's chicken tasted like gourmet food to the trio of Goonies parked underneath the shade tree on 4th Avenue. Talon, Tarashi, and Kenyatta were in Talon's scraper devouring their fried chicken and okras. All three of them were cousins. Talon was the oldest at 19, Kenyatta was a year younger, Tarashi was 14. They were from a neighborhood in Sacramento called Oak Park. Their section was also known as the Murder Mids since it sat in the center of the city and was the breeding ground for some of the city's most notorious criminals. It was an especially dangerous time in the city of Sacramento. Part of the reason was directly connected to the recent wave of releases from CYA and CDC of the known criminals who had earned their parole. Talon, along with their several other factors from his hood, were part of that wave of parolees. 4th Avenue and San Jose Way was a known cut in the P. Talon had a drug house that he trapped out of less than a half a football field away from where they were currently squelching their munchies. It was where he sold double-ups to young dealers who bled the block for their kibbles and bits. The long-haired gangster was as dangerous as they came, yet getting money was his highest motivating factor. Kenyatta wasn't just his cousin. Kenya was his ace. Their swagger was identical to each other's. It was a common occurrence for them to get mistaken for twins. Although he kept a lower profile on the streets, the people closest to them could safely argue that Kenyatta was more of a hothead than his older cousin. Individually, they were a problem for their ops, but together they were a force. Tarashi was the youngest of the young gunners. At 14, he was less experienced but just as ferocious, which was inevitable since he was raised by the same streets that molded career criminals. He knew he was getting on his older cousin's nerves that afternoon, but he didn't care. He wasn't trying to let go of a conversation that they should have ended hours ago. "You know you wrong, right?" Tarashi said between bites. Talon sighed before wiping his mouth with a napkin and saying, "You too young, Rashi. I don't know how many times I gotta tell you this." "Stop crying," Kenya told Tarashi. You'll be off the bench soon enough. And trust when I say this, when your name is finally called, you're gonna be sicker than half these niggas out here. "Anyways," Talon started, "after we pass, we all finna be up." "That's right," Kenya agreed. "On Bloods, I got you, really. Just be back. It'll be good in the end." Tarashi shook his head and continued eating. He knew nothing he said would get them a ticket on their curtain money train. That didn't matter, though. He would keep trying until they finally... J-Bone was on one that morning. He woke up with $18 in his pockets and he was dead set on getting high twice with that money. For the last week, he had been smoking dope on a daily basis. It was surprising how much he was able to scrape by with all his small-time cons. His daily routine revolved around getting high on his drug of choice. Filling his pipe with hard white was all that mattered to him. And so far, ever since he was released from prison, he managed to stay on cloud crack. When he hit the Ave that day, his mission was simple: to get more drugs than he was willing to pay for. This wasn't really hard for him. He picked up his drug addiction while in prison, and during that time, he picked up enough tactics to allow him to run circles around the average corner hustler. The young ones who barely stepped off the porch were his favorite marks. They were easily manipulated. When that didn't work, he usually regressed to an intimidation tactic. That route always worked, especially since his prison term gave him a chiseled frame. J-Bone didn't have to wait too long after arriving to the spot before he found a victim. The Ave was a gold mine when it came to finding block bleeders. Drugs were everywhere. He thought to himself when he saw a young Spanish-looking female on the block. She didn't look like she was there for anything in particular, so she had to be grinding, he assured himself. But for who? He asked himself as he scanned the neighborhood. There were a few Oak Parksters who had their females hustling for them, but not many. Since he hadn't seen her before, he naturally assumed she was out there alone. That was a dangerous thing to be doing, and he was about to be the man to show her why, he told himself before pedaling up to her on his mountain bike and asked, "Hey, you working?" "Yeah," she replied. "What's up?" Jomata was a 17-year-old juvenile delinquent with an attitude problem. She was fairly new to the hood, but not too new. J-Bone got off his bike and nonchalantly laid it on the curb before approaching her. Every move was calculated. He was quickly deciding to go with intimidation tactic. If that didn't work, knocking her out, then going through her pockets was most definitely an option. "Give me something for 30, he demanded roughly. "Let me see the bread," she replied just as aggressively. J-Bone gave her a better look and thought, okay, this little bitch got hood in her. Out loud he said, "What? You think I'm finna rob you for them punk ass crumbs? Don't be scared, little mama. My name's Jamada, homie. You want this shit or not?" Bone laughed to himself. Knocking her out was going to be a pleasure. He took a crumpled stack of bills out of his dirty jeans and made the exchange. Without waiting for her to count the money, he turned around and grabbed his bike. "Hey," Jomata barked. "This ain't 30. So what, bitch? What? Give me my money. Bitch, who you raising your voice at? You got me fucked up." J-Bone slowly laid his bike back down onto the curb. She was feeding right into his plan. It was looking to him like he was going to come up nice and quick this afternoon. "Fuck that," she spat, not showing any fear whatsoever. "Give me my money or to work now." "You got me fucked up," J-Bone said while slowly approaching her. Jomata knew what came next. She had her nigga get off me tool at the small of her back, and she wasn't planning on leaving it there for too long. "Nah, nigga, you got me fucked up." J-Bone didn't even realize she was reaching. His cockiness only allowed him to see from point A to point B. Knocking her out, then going through her pockets, bra, or panties for her stash of pebbles and change. In Jomata's head, she was already mapping out in which direction she was going to run after shooting him in the face. One thing she couldn't stand was a bully. She felt as if she had been through way too much in her short time on this earth to allow a crackhead to punk her in any way. She held her ground as she slowly pulled her heel. Tarashi was the first one to see what was going on up the street. "Check out J-Bone. That nigga finna do something to that Mexican bitch." Kenya looked at the scene and asked, "Who was that?" "I don't know," Talon replied. "I never seen her before." Kenyatta took a better look and said, "I know her. That's one of Nikki's friends. She just moved out here about 6 months ago. She from New York or something." "Blood, look at her," Talon remarked. "Baby got a burner. She finna blast blood." "On the beat," Tarashi agreed. Talon turned the ignition on and quickly put the car in gear. From the passenger seat, Kenya asked, "What you doing, blood?" "Man, we can't let her shoot J-Bone, blood. The pig's finna be on the block non-stop for the next week. We don't need that type of heat out here. It's already hot as fuck." Talon sped up half the block to where the Spanish girl was arguing with J-Bone. He pulled up to the curb, put the scraper in park, and hopped out. The pistol was out, but Bone hadn't even seen it yet. Talon had barely made it in time. Hey, Talon barked. "What's the problem, Bone?" "Man, this bitch playing with me," he replied. "What?" Jomata started before Talon lightly moved her out the way and stepped between the two. She was about to say something to the light-skinned nigga with the ponytail, but instead stayed quiet. There was something in the way the smoker was looking at him that made her sit back and watch for a second. By then, Kenya and Tarashi had gotten out the car and took their place next to Talon. It didn't matter that J-Bone had banged the set. It was obvious where their allegiance lay. Talon turned to Jomata and asked, "What's going on, ma?" For a moment, she stayed stitch-lipped, debating whether she should state her case to these random niggas. But after quickly assessing the scene, she went with her gut and said, "This nigga asked for a 30-piece, then he gave me $12. I ain't going for that shit." Talon studied the girl's mannerisms. She wasn't scared, and that made her even sexier than her extra-large breasts and juicy hips did. After checking her out for a little longer than necessary, he turned to J-Bone and said, "Give her the work back." "Blood," J-Bone pleaded. "Blood nothing," Kenyatta hissed from the side. "You heard the homie." J-Bone knew not to play with them niggas. Everyone knew about Talon and his 4th Avenue clique. They were really about everything the streets offer, from money to murder. They were activated. Bone addressed Talon. "She got my money, man." "Where her work at?" Talon asked, ignoring his statement. "Right here. Give it to her." J-Bone looked from Talon back to the bitch, then back at Talon. The whole time, Kenya and Tarashi were in his peripheral looking like hyenas. He handed the rocks back to the girl, then looked at Talon. Get off the Ave, blood, Talon ordered. You gotta pass this time, but on bloods, nigga. You come over here again with that bullshit and you ain't making it home. J-Bone grabbed his mountain bike and took off. As soon as he left, Kenya and Tarashi went back to their church's chickens meal. Talon looked at the girl and extended his hand. Hey, I'm gangster. She replied, my name's Jomata. Where you from, ma? Jomata held his gaze. She enjoyed looking at him. His gold chain sparkled from his spot on his brand new black tee. His crispy gray jeans and fresh Jordans were on point too. I'm from the island. What island? PR. He smiled. She was sexy. Puerto Rico, huh? And you be grinding? You're a unique one, he said. I just do me, you know? Yeah, I feel you. Look, if you ever need some work, I got you. The house over there with the tree in the yard, that's my spot. What? She asked. You got double ups? Yeah. All right, I might fuck with you. Her eyes held Talon's in place. Words weren't even necessary. There was an obvious spark between them. Blood, we gotta go, Kenya called out from the car. Talon